Hey, good evening. I am Robert Sumwalt, and I'm the chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board. And with us tonight is Robert Aceta, who is the investigator in charge for this tragedy here in Miami. I think most of you know that the NTSB is an independent federal agency. We are charged by Congress to investigate transportation accidents, to determine the probable cause, and then to issue safety recommendations to prevent the reoccurrence. I want to emphasize that the NTSB is here to conduct a safety investigation. We're conducting an independent safety investigation. You may have heard at a press briefing earlier this morning that the local authorities are conducting a homicide investigation, which they pointed out is routine anytime someone dies in an accident or through a crime. We're not involved in that in any way. We are looking at one thing, and that is safety. We're not here to help the lawyers build their cases, to point fingers, to lay blame, to assign fault. What we are here to do is very simple. Find out what happened so that we can keep it from happening again. So at 6 o'clock this evening, Mr. Aceta conducted an organizational meeting whereby he laid out the investigative protocols and designated parties to the NTSB's investigation. The NTSB designates those organizations to be parties of the investigation, those organizations that can provide technical expertise to our investigation. And the parties to this investigation are, there are 7 of them, Federal Highway Administration. That's a part of the U.S. Department of Transportation. The U.S. DOT Inspector General, OSHA, Miami-Dade Police Department, Florida Highway Patrol, Florida International University Police Department, and Sweetwater Municipal Police. It's very early in the investigation, so we don't have a lot of factual information to report, but I will tell you what we do have at this time. Robert will be briefing us momentarily on the bridge design and the construction, and obviously that will be a focus of this investigation. Meanwhile, part of our investigation will be to look at the overall emergency response. That is typical for any NTSB investigation. We look at the emergency response. We look at the roles and the procedures of those organizations that responded to the event. We will be documenting the vehicles involved in this mishap to see how the vehicles absorbed crash energy. I'm now going to turn it over to Robert Aceta to discuss the technical aspects of the bridge design and construction.
Good evening. I'll cover the facts about the bridge. The walkway width was 31 feet 8 inches. The canopy over the walkway was 16 feet wide. I'd like to point out in the display here, the portion to the right here was not in place yet. The only portion that was in at the time of the collapse was this portion to the left of the diagram of this elevation. The canopy, the top portion, and the walkway were integral parts of the structure that were connected by 10 diagonal members. Construction crews were working on the diagonal at this location right here at the north end of the structure at the time of the collapse. The construction crews were applying post-tensioning force that is designed to strengthen the diagonal member. And this is the location where they were working. As I mentioned, this section of the structure was not in place yet. At this time, I'd like to turn the press conference back over to Chairman Sumwalt.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much. I expect that Robert and his team will be on scene for several more days. They've got a lot of work to do. As you know, the recovery operation has taken precedence with the local authorities. That's a very, very important process that has to be done right. That has not really impeded our investigation. Late this afternoon, we were able to get up and climb up on top of the part. This section right over in here. So we've been able to get on some parts of the bridge, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. Our goal while being here on scene is to document what I like to refer to as the perishable evidence, the information that goes away with the passage of time. This bridge, the collapsed bridge, will not be here in a few days. It will be out of the way. So we need to document those things that we can while that evidence is there. Our mission is to find out not only what happened, we know what happened, the bridge collapsed. We want to find out why it happened. And again, our entire purpose for being here is to learn from these things so that we can keep them from happening again. I want to thank all of those who have been involved with responding to this tragic event. It's been a long 30 hours for everyone involved, and we really appreciate their hard work and their cooperation. Again, there's not a lot of information at this point. We will be releasing information as we find it. You can follow us at Twitter. Our Twitter handle is at NTSB_newsroom, or you can follow us at www.ntsb.gov. In just a moment, I'll call for questions. Again, we don't have a lot of questions, a lot of answers at this point, but we will answer as best that we can. So thank you. Yes, that's what we'll do. We'll ask you to raise your hand. I'll call on you, and then you can state your name and affiliation. So we'll begin right here. Thank you.
Just so we're understanding correctly, so what was in place, what was left of that central column? And
Right.
diagonal, you called them members.
This was phase one. Phase two was a 99-foot section that was to be constructed. It hadn't been constructed yet. So from this column here to this abutment here, we just had the span over State Route 41. And the diagonals are these pieces here that connect the canopy to the walkway. They're all integral parts. If you were to think of it as a truss bridge, this is the upper cord, the lower cord, and the truss members that connect the two.
So the cables were not up yet in the large
Uh, As I understand it, these were cosmetic. They were not structural members, and they hadn't, of course, because they hadn't finished this section, they hadn't started on this yet, as we understand it.
There's a question right here.
CBS 4, talk about negligence for a second. You're an engineer and you hear that there's a crack in the bridge. How do you determine if that's safe or not? If you're going to shut it down, if you're going to shut the street down, what's the protocol for that?
So the question is that if there's a crack in the structure, how do you determine whether or not it's safe?
Correct.
I don't think we know at this point factually that there was a crack in the bridge.
But it's been confirmed.
Well, we have not confirmed that.
Okay, but how do you go about determining that? If you learn as an engineer there's a crack in a bridge, how do you determine if that's safe for people passing through? What do you do?
Robert?
I would have to say that a crack in a bridge does not necessarily mean that it's unsafe. I know the crews were out there inspecting it and they were applying tension to strengthen a member. I don't know if that was related to the cracks that they discovered. That's still too early in the investigation for us to determine.
Question right here.
Chief Matt and Miami Carroll, how long do you think that you'll be on the site, and how long do you think before bodies are actually taken out?
Well, how long will we actually be on site, and how long will it take before the body recovery is completed? The recovery of the remains is the purview of the local authorities. They are working very hard. We are here to investigate the accident and the response to the accident, so that's not in our wheelhouse. But I know that they have prioritized that, and they are doing the best that they can under the extreme circumstances that they have. How long will we be here? I do believe that several days, maybe 5 to 7 days, but once our team leaves here, that's really just the beginning of the investigation, because there's a lot of work that goes into this. This will be a very complicated and a very extensive investigation, but the NTSB has investigated bridge collapses in the past. So I hope that answers your question. There's a question right here.
Andrew Scheidel, 7 News here in Miami. So while they're working on this bridge, is it a normal operation for something that was just put up on Saturday to already have traffic flow underneath it? And what tests did they do once it was placed up on Saturday to ensure that traffic, at least at the time that they believe, was safe to travel?
The question is, what practices, protocols should be in place after a bridge has been put up? If it was only put up on the 10th, why would they have traffic going under it a few days later? I think that's the gist of your question. And we want to look at how the contractors identified risk and mitigated those risks associated with the construction of this bridge. We know, for example, that when they were putting up the bridge on, I think, Saturday, the 10th, that they shut down traffic there. Of course, part of the reason was because the bridge structure was in the roadway. But we want to understand what those decisions were and why they were made. Question right here.
Hi, Patricia Lezay from the New York Times. Mr. Senna, you said that you know that there were cables being tightened. Can you tell us which cables, what those cables are for, and what other testing was being done yesterday?
The question is about the cables that were being tightened, where that they were located, and is that what they were working on yesterday? Is that
Or other testing?
on their testing? As I mentioned, in this member right here is where they were tightening on the cable, and it was to strengthen that member. Now, we have yet to determine what the failure mechanism was, and that's still under our investigation. But the purpose of tightening that cables is supposed to help strengthen that member, but we need to determine what went wrong.
Question here.
Johnny Archer, NBC6 News. Should there have been any other additional support temporarily while that bridge was still under construction? Traffic was still traveling under?
And your question is, should there be additional precautions taken? Support.
Temporarily while it was still under construction.
I'll go back to what I said just a few moments ago. We want to look at how the contractor identified the risk associated with what they were doing and how they plan to mitigate those risks. So we are very, very, very early into the investigation. These are exactly the types of things that we intend to find out. And I think the very question that you've posed there is one that will be key to this investigation. There's a question back here.
Hi, Al Hinkle with NBC News. A two-part question. The cable that was being tightened, was it an internal cable inside that cement member, number one? And is that typical on this type of bridge construction and installation?
The question was, were the cables that were being tightened internal to the diagonal member? And the other portion of the question was, is that typical for this type of bridge construction? I could say that there were two cables that they were working on at the time. They were internal to that diagonal member, but I can't say whether or not that is typical for this type of construction. Again, I'm not a bridge engineer or a bridge expert, so I really can't answer. I'm not qualified to answer that.
Follow up, if I may, is that where the point of failure is for the bridge?
That's yet for us to determine. If the question was, is that the point of failure? We're still trying to determine that based on the evidence that we were examining.
Okay, back here in the back. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Janine Sands with Local 10 News. This is also for Robert Seta. And again, we're not bridge engineers, so we have a lot of questions. So those cables that were being tightened, you said two. And can you confirm that was the north end of the bridge?
The question is, were the cables at the north end of the bridge in that diagonal member? Yes, they were. The furthest north member of the diagonal member was located here, and that was of the existing structure that was in place was the north end.
And because by accounts on surveillance video that we've seen, it appears the north end of the structure has rubbed glass.
The question is, based on the video that's been on the internet, it appears that that's where the collapse began. Just preliminary, it appears that way, but we still have a lot of work to do.
Can you explain to me how the tightening or loosening of those cables would impact?
Excuse me. Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware of any tips that were provided by any engineers about any cracks?
Are we aware of any tips that might have been provided by any engineers about any cracks? And the answer is we are not aware of any tips at this point. We plan to do a lot of interviews, look at a lot of documents, examine a lot of documents, and so we want to find out everything that we need to know about this tragedy. And this will go to our full board, where the board will deliberate, the full 5-member board of the National Transportation Safety Board. After staff has completed their report, we will bring this to the board, we will deliberate it, and we will issue safety recommendations. We'll have findings and recommendations, things that can help prevent this from happening again. I'll take one more question. It's right here.
Jimmy Johnson, WPS 25 News West Palm. I know your engineers have been underground for quite a bit of time now. Is there one big takeaway from just your observation of the scene and construction and damage that you guys saw on that day?
I'll let Robert answer that, and then I might follow up on that. Thank you for your question.
I think the question was, is there, since we've arrived on scene, is there anything that we've taken that stood out? I know that talking with the bridge engineers that are assisting us from the Federal Highway Administration, that this is a different design type of bridge. It's not something that we've encountered before, and I'll go on to say that it's not uncommon in other bridge structures for them to put members under tension to strengthen them. It's not an unusual procedure, but we do need to find out why and what may have caused the failure mechanism. We don't know yet.
So what takeaway do I personally have? There's a technical side to this. There's certainly the technical side to this, but there's a humanistic side to it as well. And you look at the layout of the automobiles, and there were cars that had just made it through, and the trunk of the bridge, the bridge fell onto the trunk of the car. And then there's one just a few feet behind it that is smashed. And it really brings a human side to this, that life is very precious, and that is our commitment. We don't want to come back to something like this again. Our goal is to keep these things from happening again. I want to thank you all for covering this. It's a very important story. Thank you very much.